Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 184 of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for joining me. We've got Michael Welch joining us in this episode, young Jack O'Neill from Stargate SG-1, Season 7, Fragile Balance. He and I haven't spoken in nearly 20 years, so it's going to be, I've been really looking forward to catching up. Before we get into this, if you enjoy Stargate, and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, it would mean a great deal if you click that like button. It helps the channel continue to grow the audience. And please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks on the Dial the Gate and gateworld.net YouTube channels. Now, as this is a live show, some of them we do pre-recorded, some of them we do live. We have the guests joining us live, and I've got a team of moderators in the YouTube chat who will be fielding your questions for the first half of the show, and then when we get more toward the back half, we'll go ahead and turn the show over to you, and I'll go through those questions and start inviting you to answer them. So inviting Michael to answer them. All right. Without further ado, I am privileged to welcome someone I've been watching. Many of us have been watching since he was, this big. Michael Welch. We know him as young Jack O'Neill. You may know him as Artem. You may know him as Mike in Twilight. Sir, it is so good to be back with you again. How are you?
David, it's an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you again. I cannot believe it has been about almost 20 years.
Isn't that crazy?
And you know what's funny? It got me thinking, because I've been acting for a minute. I have one or two guest spots under my belt at this point, and I gotta be honest, no one is like knocking down my door to talk about the episode of CSI Miami I did 15 years ago, or The Pretender, or Shasta McNasty. It's just, and yet Stargate somehow, this thing just keeps going. It keeps living on. It keeps finding different iterations. The one thing that has not changed from my vantage point is I have always been honored to be a part of this universe, even in the small way that I was able to contribute.
You're a sci-fi fan, aren't you?
I am, yeah. I would say I like doing it more than I am like an ardent watcher, but I do love sci-fi. Yeah.
So like you indicated, even 20 years from now, from then, we're still people are still asking to talk. Why do you think that is? What's happening? What is it that's captured the cultural zeitgeist about this type of content? It's not just Stargate, it's Star Wars. Star Trek Picard just wrapped.
I know. Well, what you're asking is a larger philosophical question. I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole you want to get. I assume your fan base is probably into it. But I think part of what's cool about being just a human being, being an artist, a storyteller, is that we are the only living things on this planet, as far as I know, that are able to imagine a world that is different from ours, and then take the steps to create that world and express it, and ultimately tie it back into universal truths that apply to our own lives. So I think there is just something that is uniquely human about the sci-fi experience, tapping into our imaginations, and ultimately, I think, hopefully making us, more empathetic and better people. I mean, I know these are very lofty ideas, but this is how people who create this kind of stuff think about this. And as an audience, it's not your obligation to necessarily go that deep. I mean, you just might like the spaceships, and that's good enough. You know what I mean?
And there are those fans.
100%. I mean, I was that with Game of Thrones. Like, I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, you know what? I'm good with the dragons. I don't need to know every detail about every house in this thing. So there's different elements to it. But I think deep down, that's kind of what's going on there. It has the unique ability to tap into something that I don't think other sort of mediums or art forms have the ability to access in the same way.
I think that's a very considerate answer. If I may even simplify further down, I would say,
Please do.
no, just the phrase Stargate is chicken soup. You know, I mean,
Right.
it's something that you can put on with your kids, and they can watch on an entertainment level. And as they get older, they can read things into it that they want to read. And we as adults, I mean, going back and watching some of this content as a decade over decade is like, I glean something different from it, but it's all things that I can apply in my own life. Now, you talk with Brad and Robert and all these guys. That's not necessarily what they set out to do. They set out to create great entertainment. But the choices that these writers made in the medium that they made it with allow it to be reinterpreted across time in many different ways.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. And you initially were asking about sci-fi more generally. If you want to talk about Stargate specifically, I do think there are elements of it that almost feel a little punk rock to me. Like it's very difficult to pull off the tap dance that they do. And I'm kind of just talking about SG-1. I'll fully admit I'm not that familiar with the expanded universe beyond that show, but it had this way of kind of being just meta enough, like just sort of self-aware and winking at the audience enough so that we could go into it going, well, I kind of know not to take this too seriously, but yet at the same time, the stakes were high enough that you were still fully invested. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. It's not frivolous, but when there are episodes that teeter on frivolous, we're invited to take that journey. So
yes, and the reason I say it's punk rock is because it has that a bit, like it doesn't have the same, just objectively, cultural impact as a Star Wars or Star Trek or Twilight, for that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in a way that's almost cooler because you have to it's like you have to be part of the club to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
if you tried to explain, Richard Dean Anderson's portrayal of O'Neill to someone who had no familiarity with the show, and you had to explain what his character in a sentence or two, I don't know that you could really do it accurately. It's just you just have to see it to get it, and then once you're sort of in the in crowd, then it gives you a better understanding of kind of the life that's behind this thing. So and I think that's part of it. So it's, even though it's lasted all this time, and you're talking to me 20 years after my one episode on this show, it's still like, I don't know, it's like still underground or something. You know what I mean?
In
like
many respects, it's not like blowing the world over. But I get.
I think that's kind of cooler, to be honest.
Well, yeah, exactly. Ways. It's global. It's a global phenomenon in a way that some of the other sci properties not necessarily are. It's huge in Australia and New Zealand. It's huge in the UK. And we're talking about a U.S. paramilitary television series. There's something about it there, and I think a lot of it goes back to Rick. It's his whimsy. It's his carefree style of, oh my God, here we go again. We're invited to acknowledge that, it's not necessary. It doesn't have to be Battlestar Galactica. It doesn't have to knock you over and then stomp on your privates for you to get the broader sci-fi message and have fun.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, there's just such obvious joy from the people making it, that just like you just feel it through the screen, man. You really do. So yeah, I love it. And man, I looking back now, to be able to try to in some way replicate or recreate what Richard was able to to bring to life is just it's something that I'm glad I didn't have a better sense of how daunting that potentially was going into it.
You wouldn't have been able to do your job.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I just worked on, the the first episode of Quantum Leap last year, the reboot, and talking to Ray. I don't think I'm speaking out of school here, but Ray very explicitly was like, look, if I for a second thought that I was replacing Scott, like I would kill myself. I can't, like, that's not a possible thing to do. So, not having a real sense of this truly iconic actor, bringing this truly iconic character to the place that he did, I'm glad I was in the dark coming into the process and was really just kind of able to focus on the acting and the performance and creating something with, the director, Peter DeLuise, and the rest of the cast. And really, honestly, still didn't have a sense of kind of what that meant to the fan base until after it aired, and I got to, experience the reaction firsthand. So I'm grateful for that, because it kept the work more pure in a sense.
Absolutely. And Peter was a great student of observing Rick, so I'm sure he had a lot to offer in that regard in terms of helping you capture that performance, which has to be nuanced because we as an audience are looking for the tells that identify you as Rick, well, you as Jack in that case. The remember the shut up, those kinds of gestures, and just like, hello, this is crazy. Tell us about exploring that process. Well, first of all, how'd you get? Did you just audition for the role? Take us back. Was it a regular audition or?
It was a regular audition, and I had not seen an episode going into the audition, so I just took the material and broke it down and I basically prepared as you would for any other audition, and just kind of like played the character as truthfully as I knew how. Now, keep in mind too, like, this is back before like YouTube or what. Like, there was not necessarily an easy way to access shows you didn't already watch. We didn't have any of what we have now. There would be no excuse if the audition came in now and it's like you're playing a clone of an established character. Like, they would expect you to watch a dozen episodes before even coming into the audition. That expectation wasn't necessarily there. So they cast me based on the audition, and then once I went up to Canada, they were nice enough to fly me up.
I lost your audio. You okay?
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Continue. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, this technology. I don't like this technology. I want to go back. I so want to go back to an analog world. I was so much better with that then. Now I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you?
Oh,
I don't want this. I don't want this.
It's okay.
This is going so well.
It's okay. You're good. Okay. Let me make sure I'm transmitting.
All right. Let me reset my Bluetooth. Put on Do Not Disturb too.
Right.
Clip this, by the way.
We're live,
this is what
Mike.
People want to see. All right, the power's back on.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Are we connected?
Can you hear me now?
All right, Bluetooth's coming off. We're going right through the phone.
Can you hear me?
Okay? Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's good enough.
Yes, it is. So they flew you up.
Yes. Sorry. They flew me up and gave me a bunch of episodes to watch. And again, like they flew me up early so I could sort of study it beforehand, which is not, which is like not common. Like, a production isn't looking to spend more money than they have to spend generally. Like, they, usually especially if you're a guest star, like, they'll just fly you up the day before you start filming. But I'm sure that's something that Peter fought for. Oh, and I just, as a quick side note, so Peter DeLuise, who directed that one, he was instrumental in finding the character as I did it. Like all those moments you're talking about, like, those were very specifically planted, deliberately planted by him. So if you were a fan of that performance in any way, he is, I would say, as if not more responsible than me, even frankly. Like I have to execute the game plan, but he was the one who was able to kind of draw up the X's and O's and really shape it in a way that I think ended up working pretty well. So yeah, and I just watched the tapes. It was just VHS tapes at the time,
Right.
and I just watched them over and over again. And
They
I
were
mean,
good
literally
enough not
down
to
to
just
like,
give you a.
from
Can you hear me? Okay. Go ahead.
yes, go ahead.
No, please.
No, that's okay. Working from the the macro down to the micro. So you have to understand kind of the essence of the character in a larger way, and then really get down to those minute details. So I would just watch, and he would do a line, and then I would do it the same way that he did it. I mean, honestly, I was literally just like, copying sort of word for word, physical trait, everything that I could do within the course of those like 3-4 days in prep. And then eventually, and then once we got onto set, we just shaped it, and I got sort of more and more comfortable as we went along, but it was a very collaborative, like moment to moment shaping process.
Wow. So when you say they flew you up, you're saying they flew you up early, specifically for days for you to prepare yourself for the character.
That is correct. Yeah, under
Wow.
a different circumstance, I probably got an extra 4 days than one would normally get for something like that.
Wow. And not only did you get to prep for Jack, but they went out of their way to give you background detail, story info, episodes on the Asgard. You told me years ago that they sent you Revelations, which was like the big Asgard episode before the one that you had. So you weren't just walking in to seeing, a 3 feet tall puppet. You had backstory to be able to, interact with this thing on a more, appropriate level.
Correct. Yeah. They no, it was very smartly done, honestly, like the way that they did it, because yeah, I mean if you think about it, like it's important for me, uh, since I have the full knowledge of this character, for me, the actor, to kind of understand some of these things, at least in a very basic way, coming into it. So
Wow.
yeah, they did. They gave me they gave me the episodes that they thought were most relevant to um, understand the story that I was going into for this episode.
Got it. Wow. I'm curious, Mike. The obviously your body of work has increased since this was in your in your front and center. I'm curious as to the quality of this production in terms of its moving parts, in terms of its execution, compared to a lot of the other things that you have done. Where does Stargate fall in terms of the quality of the and professionalism of the people who put it together, the consideration of the players on set and your director? Is it near the top? Is it near the bottom? Where does Stargate fit in your pantheon of looking back in your body of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So TV is a very like it's very fast. They have, I mean, if you think about it, like, so a typical show is an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 episodes are essentially the equivalent of a movie, if a movie is 2 hours. I mean, I'm speaking in very general terms here. Um, and one episode of TV is generally shot in 8 days. So if you think about your favorite movie and you go, okay, now they had to shoot that in 16 days. So, there's not a whole lot of time for uh for nonsense. You gotta,
Yeah.
and especially as a guest star, like your job is just to kind of show up, do your job, and like you know, um don't slow things down. I mean, for the most part.
Yeah. Don't
So
cost money.
don't cost money. Yeah, that's right. So, so what I appreciated about this experience, especially looking back at it, is the care that they took, with not only with my performance, but with all the details that make that show what it is. Um, there was a real sense that I got of the responsibility of being like good shepherds, good caretakers of this thing, that that for the fan base specifically. It's almost, it's like I had an opportunity to go to a table read for The Simpsons once, and I sort of got that same kind of feeling of like, we know that we have this golden egg in our hands, and there's like a responsibility in that they feel that you don't, quite frankly, you don't get that sense on most of these shows that you go on, especially if it's like a procedural or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like that, there tends to be this thing where you end up kind of doing things by rote. But from the top to the bottom, from the creators, producers, writers, director, down to the cast and crew, there was a sense of kind of the specialness of this thing, and a sense of the responsibility to take care of it properly. Now, you're still working under the constraints of television, but they were always very deliberate about making sure they got all those very important details right that frankly made Stargate what it was.
Absolutely. And it's not something that's trivial. I mean, you are coming in to replace the lead for essentially an hour of a project that's been running 6 seasons before you. I mean, that's practically unheard of for the show. They would go on to do 3 more. That's unheard of. In 3 years, they produced 120 hours of television. No one does that. Certainly not now. And it has to be a well-oiled machine to be able to pull that off. Everyone's got to be able to pull together, but also have a good time. And Peter is notorious for having a good time.
Yes, that's right. And that's the balancing act that I'm talking about. And that's kind of when creativity works at its best too. That sort of perfect balance between work and play. I've heard, just through whatever sources you hear things when you're in entertainment, that Anthony Hopkins, in his scripts, if you go through them, it's like there'll be little doodles in there. It's like there'll be, so they'll be like, and they'll be full because he'll read a script 100 times or whatever it is, and it's just like, and half of it is just, is obviously like the character work or the story work or whatever, all that technical stuff, and then the other half is just like little drawings and little jokes here on the side, little fun expressions. So I think it's a very like my point being that I think like creativity tends to work at its best when there's sort of that perfect balance, and I don't think anybody pulled that off better than Stargate.
Have you been in situations on other projects where you had to cram to make your day, uncomfortably so? Like it was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I've been on whole productions that it's every moment feels like that. And it creates a different kind of energy. Now you still have to be professional, you still have to do your job, and that's a different sort of skill set that you learn over the years. I remember Jim Carrey years ago on Inside the Actor Studio talked about how being in an acting class is great, but really what would be more realistic is if in the middle of your scene while you're in class, that all the students just started throwing tennis balls at your head, and you had to figure out how to still give the same performance, because that's more than like the reality of what acting actually is figuring out how to, sort of work through all of the things that aren't necessarily lined up to be totally conducive to giving your best performance and still managing to give a good performance. Luckily, Stargate was not that experience. And I think because they listen, in fairness, you're right. I mean, the lift was sort of so heavy, not just for me, but for the whole show to kind of make that work, that it wouldn't have served anybody to add additional complications to that process. So they kind of, so we got a little bit more leeway than perhaps one normally would as a guest star on a typical show.
Absolutely. And, with a little bit of extra time to finesse and
That's right.
get your performance figured out before you go in there, you can have a great time. So do you have any memories of Amanda, Michael, Chris, Don S. Davis, who we lost a few years ago, or being rigged up in that suspension for that piece of Asgard technology that had you floating? Any moments from the set that you recall? I know this is really pushing way back there, but if there's anything that stands out.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, so more generally, what I can remember is that Amanda was, honest to God, as sweet and supportive and lovely and wonderful as one can be. I mean, really, she, and this is gonna sound like, I don't know how it's gonna sound.
Yeah.
But I remember like there were a few days where she like invited me into her trailer to have lunch with her. Now I know that doesn't seem like a big deal or whatever, but you gotta keep in mind, like, again, when you're working in a long-term way, 9-10 months out of the year, sometimes up to 16 hours a day, and it's just the nature of TV. It's just how it is. That I'll tell you, from my standpoint, when I'm like the lead in something, lunch is kind of that tends to be kind of your sacred time to just sort of like be by yourself and recharge and re-energize and whatever. And she just like, and who am I? I'm not going to be here next week. And she still like made the effort to like make me feel as welcomed and kind of at home as possible. And so I like, I always try to point out when people sort of like, do things that are nice for no other reason other than to just be nice. There's nothing to gain out of that other than just being a good person. So she's a good person, and I just want people to know that.
Absolutely, no, she's great.
Yeah. Christopher, I remember being, frankly, kind of a ball buster, but in a way that was like fun and like nothing harmful. Yeah, he and Michael were really funny together. The two of them. The only sort of specific. See, this is the problem. The only specific things I remember, I can't even say.
That sounds right for Christopher Judge. He was, for him being on that set, if he wasn't going to have a good time, if he wasn't going to have the ability to have a good time, he didn't want to be there. And that was a tone that Rick and Michael Greenberg set.
That's
we're
right.
going to come in, we're going to work hard, we're going to work our asses off, and we are going to have fun. Otherwise, it's not worth doing.
Not worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
I remember you telling me a story of about wanting to make sure that you got some close-ups, and they're like, "We're in season 7 now. We're giving these shots away." Do you remember that?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, that's true. Right. I made some sort of stupid joke about how like I was like, "All right, come on now, guys, don't be stealing no scenes from me," and they were like, "We're not stealing. No, we're giving scenes away." So yeah, it was just stuff like that. I mean, that's the kind of atmosphere that show was.
You and I had talked about Joan of Arcadia and how much we missed it, and the great, as great as it was for 2 seasons, it had a potential to be so much more. Then you went along to Twilight, which I had not seen until last night. I watched the first one.
Okay.
And it was one of those things where, I've always like supposed at some point I would get around to see it. And so in talking with you, I was like, okay, I'll watch it. And, it's not my cup of tea,
sure,
but I get why it's such it's a lot of pining. You're pining for her. She's pining for him. The other him is pining for her.
That's right.
But I get why it's such a global phenomenon.
Yeah.
I get why people are drawn to it so much, because they need that kind of connection. And there's this subtext of Beauty and the Beast that runs through the thing, at least in terms of the Act 1, about the beauty taming the beast. What an adventure that had to have been for you.
Yeah, that was wild. I mean, again, looking at it in a more sort of lofty way, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's Beauty and the Beast. There's kind of a Romeo and Juliet
Mm.
quality. There, to me, the thing that like the real the real sort of visceral driving force behind it is that that the idea of like that first love at like 17, you
Yeah.
know what I mean,
It's
is
intense.
so it's such an intense and unique experience. And the idea of like expanding that out to forever,
Yeah.
to me, I was like, wow, yeah, I can see like totally understand how people are so drawn to this. And then of course there's more to it than that. But yeah, I think at its core, um, there's real elements there that makes sense why it got so popular. And yeah, it was a totally wild experience. Again, I similarly to how I explained going into Stargate, I didn't really. I mean, it's not that I didn't have a sense. We knew the books were popular going into those movies, but at the same time, it was also just a bunch of kids, trying to make a movie. I mean, I remember, specifically like as an example, one of the things that I did in the film, it's probably my most like the thing that if I died tomorrow, my mark on American cinematic history is taking my wet hat off and shaking it over Kristen Stewart's head and asking her how she likes the rain because she's from Arizona where they don't have rain. Now, to be honest, I probably, again, this is like we were all. My point is like I probably wouldn't have the balls to do that now with Kristen Stewart being who she is and me. You know what I mean? Like you don't just like, and it didn't even really occur to me like, maybe it's not like the coolest thing that I'm like getting the star of this movie like wet just for this one moment for me to have. That's kind of
This
silly
wasn't
and fun.
scripted?
Not that part.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean the line was there.
Oh, but the
you know,
gesture. I see.
yeah, me taking it and like making the hat wet and like getting her wet, like that wasn't in the script. And Catherine Hardwicke's a maniac, so she just let me do whatever I wanted. So, and I say that in the most loving way possible. I loved working with her. So again, it's a similar sort of thing where it's like it's like, man, there's a lesson in this, which is like the more you can sort of get to the purity of just creating the work
Hmm.
and kind of separate yourself from all these other elements, the more just the more fun it is and the more sort of freeing it is, and the more you can actually I think frankly create something that people can connect to. you know I think that something that frankly, like, I'm not a huge Avengers guy, it's just not my thing, but I think that something that those actors do really well is, they're all like the biggest movie stars in the world in the biggest movie franchise in the world, and yet somehow it still just kind of looks like they're just in a room creating something. Like they have, that's what makes the movie stars, is they have the ability to just strip all that other stuff away and just like do the work and like find the joy in it and not
Hmm.
be thinking about like, oh, this, I have to do this scene a certain way because this is going to end up in the poster or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so yeah, so the all of this to say, like the first Twilight, yeah, it was a very fun experience. Um, and things would happen. Like, I mean, the first sense that I got that it was going to be as big as it was is like, this is, when we, after our first day of filming, we shot at a high school, and there was like, this was right around the time when everyone started filming everything and putting it on the internet. This was like we were right at the cusp of that. And
iPhone
then
era.
like that night on YouTube, there was like whatever it was, 100,000 views or whatever on this video, on this grainy video of like us looking like dots, just sort of walking around a high school. And I was like, oh wow, like this. So the appetite for this thing is powerful enough
Yeah.
that people will just absorb anything that's put out there. That's when I was like, okay, this this might actually like be something.
There.
So yeah, pretty wild, man.
It just took the whole world by storm. I know uh, uh, Bill Condon His partner and I worked on another project, a Stargate related project together for a while, and he was just crazy about it. I mean, he just absolutely loved the content. So there is something there, and a lot of it, as long as you're hanging it on Joseph Campbell's bullet points, his hero's journey structure, a lot of it runs itself.
Yes.
So
100%.
And the author really got that. So
yeah, right. And that's what's great about, being a creator now, is like there's such a rich history of good storytelling at this point. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. Like these structures. Correct. These structures work.
Yeah, they exist in us. So
yes.
From Campfire to YouTube channel occasionally breaking. So those campfires didn't do that. Is there a role that you can tell me about that pushed you in ways that you didn't anticipate, or ways that you did anticipate, but it was still not what you expected? Did that make sense?
It did. Oh, hello, Kitty.
Hello, Kitty. Yeah. Oh, hi.
Man, you asked some great questions, and I love your curious brain.
Well, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So,
I know it's not an easy thing to ask. Just this one thing, this one time, but because it's a very emotionally relevant question.
Yeah. I think this is not the sexiest answer.
No, it's okay.
But the things that I have found the most challenging in the process of production are usually technical things.
Okay.
And what I mean by, because I've always had a very sort of good sense of I don't even know how to explain this, of separating the character from myself, meaning like if whatever problems the character is going through, I don't take that home. I'm not one of those actors. In fact, that wouldn't work for me. I need my decompression time. Yeah. And it's great because I can, because I have this sort of very strong divide between a good sense, a good understanding of the separation of like my life and my work. I'm able to dive into my work head first without a safety net and not have to worry that it's going to like affect my life. So I can go as dark as I want to go, or as whatever. There's no limit to where I would take myself. Because I know that ultimately it's not going to like negatively affect my life. So in that sense, I can't say that anything has taken me anywhere emotionally that I wasn't prepared to go. Okay. I think the things that are challenging is like, as you work your way up in the industry, it's like, okay, so for a while I'm just sort of doing, guest spots, and that's a very specific thing. And then I remember like my first time being a lead in a film, and just figuring out exactly what that means as I'm doing it. And I remember the first time I like cried on camera, and just like certain things where you go like, I'm in the moment and I go, okay, I know what I need to do to like cry right now. And it just like clicked in that moment. It's like, okay, now I know how to do that. So it's like, that a few years ago, I was in a horror film and working with these amazing horror actors, and just getting to watch them is a movie called The Final Wish. So like Tony Todd was in it, and Lynn Shay, and
Candyman.
Doug, is it Doug Jones? Shoot.
Yes.
One of the Dougs that does all the monsters.
Yep. Yeah, like in Pan's Labyrinth and everything. I've heard he's brilliant.
Yeah, it may not be Doug. It wasn't the guy who was in The Way to Water. It's like the other Doug.
Oh, okay. The other Doug. Okay.
There's another Doug, and he's great, and I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. I'm not remembering his last name. But like, but my point is like to watch him and go like, oh, there's like a horror movie thing that these guys have like clicked into and can access. That's cool. Let me learn from them. And now I have that in my tool belt. So it's really just, acting is like, it's as big and complicated and simple as life itself. It's a reflection of life. So, the difference is frankly just the technical element of it. Like, how do you actually express these things to make it look like it's someone that's just naturally living their life? Because it's an inherently unnatural thing, right? It's a law of nature that when someone knows they're being observed, it changes their behavior. Not just a person, like that's anything that's alive, that's aware it's being observed, its behavior automatically changes. So how do you can't reverse that? So that's why you have to learn technique and different technical aspects of it, so that you can look like someone. You can pretend that you're not being observed when you know you are. So those are the things that I found that are like challenging, but in a good way, that continue to help facilitate your growth over the years. But yeah, I'm not someone that's ever had an issue with not being able to go to certain places emotionally because of how it would affect my personal life. That's just not how I'm built.
So you've got a healthy partition. I think that it sounds like, from that kind of perspective, if I were in your place, I would be interested in doing as many genres as possible, so as to like facilitate like a kaleidoscope, a Rolodex of technique.
Yeah,
that would be something.
Yeah, and it's even more than that, because you're right. It's genres, it's mediums, and understanding the distinction between like film, television, theater, voiceover. It's it's like co-star versus guest star versus lead versus, you know what I mean? Like there's so many, all of these things are ultimately like a cog in the wheel of telling good stories. And I'm also lucky in that sense, in terms of my perspective, where like, of course there's ego in it, but ultimately I just want to tell good stories, and I just want to, be a part of that process. And obviously the better I am, the more it like it will contribute to telling a good story. So maybe the effect is the same, but I'm not, I'm just not someone that has ever, I'm not in it for career advancement. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I just want to, like,
you want to take part.
I want to tell good stories and do my part to, and and ultimately just entertain. I mean, that's really what it's all about. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, 100%. That is what I like to do, and in a sense, it's what I've been lucky enough to do. I've had a wide range of different sort of things that I've worked on. Frankly, probably to the detriment of my career, because what happens a lot is that people will go, "Oh, I know you, but I don't know how I know you."
Right.
Or like, "Oh, wait, you were in that? Oh, that's you too? Oh, wait, I've seen all 6 of these things and never made the connection that was all you." So that's not generally how movie stars operate. Usually it's like, "Oh, yeah, Tom Hanks, of course, that's Tom Hanks, and he's Tom Hanks and everything he does." And I'm praising that. I'm saying I'm doing it wrong. But that's just how I just don't have enough, like, I don't know. The personal ambition is secondary to being a servant of whatever it is that that people are nice enough to let me be a part of.
I have a confession on that line. I have been anticipating Quantum Leap since I heard it was announced. I'm a huge Quantum Leap fan. Cool. And I'm watching the pilot. Martin Garrow is a friend of mine. And I'm watching the pilot, and I'm getting about 10 minutes into it, and it's like, oh my God, it's Michael.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's like, was it the beard? I don't know. I didn't recognize you at all. Were you familiar? How familiar were you with Quantum Leap before doing the new pilot?
I mean, familiar enough. I actually have an older brother that was an actor years and years and years ago, and he was on the original Quantum Leap.
I did not know that.
Yeah. He was in an episode. So I had seen the original.
Okay.
I loved it. I mean, I who doesn't love Quantum Leap? I mean, it's so cool. conceptually and otherwise. But no, and to that end, I mean, even sorry to take it back to the same place, but even for that part, it was like, I kind of had decided with really just the hair and makeup people, like, hey, so let's usually kind of like, my face tends to look better when like this is less than this, but I said, nah, it's good, leave it all, let's leave it scraggly. I had like kind of, the dark circles under my eyes. I was like, leave them, don't cover that up with makeup, like it's good. Like
based on the story, it makes sense.
And that's right. I mean, that's the thing that excites me is not like what's going to make me look good. It's like how can I contribute to this story? It's just that's what like gets me revved up about working more than anything else. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't remember your question.
Yeah, working on the pilot,
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was very tricky in a few ways because first of all, it was the first episode, so I had no reference to look at, which is always difficult. In fact, I've had several friends who have auditioned for the show now that have reached out and been like, "Oh, hey, I watched the first episode for reference, and I saw that you were in it." So,
right, exactly.
So it's tricky when you kind of don't know what a show is going into it, and that part was tricky in the sense that like it had to be just kind of a perfect balance between someone that was like he had to be like likable enough that the audience would be on his side this whole time, but also like he had to kind of be hard enough that he would be a believable criminal. So then it's like, but then of course as an actor you can't like play that. You have to take all that information and then just somehow ultimately create a believable character. So it was, and the show is just, it's very technical. It's very like, there's like holograms and there's a lot going on. So you have to, they're very,
and it's a period piece.
It's right. Absolutely. It's very precise. So it was a challenge. I mean, I'll be totally real, but I again, luckily the actor, I mean, pretty much all my scenes were with Raymond Lee, who's, I mean, he's the best. He's a fabulous actor. So that always helps when you're working with someone that is that good. It gives you something to bounce off of, The one thing in retrospect, I wish I had a better sense of the pacing of the show. And if I'm to be self-critical at all, the performance does feel a little choppy because they had to kind of chop it up in the editing room. And I wish if I had a better sense of that, I could have, put the pace into the performance so that they didn't have to chop it up in the editing room, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's something that anyone would even notice or care. But yeah, so those were the challenges with that. Other than that, awesome cast and crew. I have to say, I actually hadn't worked in a minute up to that point. I think it had been a good like 6 or 7 months or something, which is not atypical in an acting life. And the crew, it was like, I mean, it was super like everyone was like in their 20s, and it was like of every like race and whatever, you know what I mean? Like it was a real sort of like, it was just really cool. It was a really high energy production. So yeah, it was really cool to be a part of the first episode.
One of the things I'm interested to see if you think that you agree with this this criticism or not, especially with a lot of genre network television, is the velocity in which it moves. You put the original Quantum Leap pilot up against this one. This one moves 4 times fast.
Absolutely.
It has so many ideas, and part of it is designed to keep you invested in it, because I think part of it's just our culture now. But the other part of it is it has a lot to say. And one of my frustrations with a lot of programming now is the fever pitch at which it's presented. And then I'll put on an M. Night Shyamalan, project like his series Servant, or, Knock at the Door, which just came out, and his deliberate just slam on the brakes, and that it can deliver the same, if not better, emotional current that through those slower performances and those slower shots, rather than one after the other.
Yeah,
it's wild. Do you? Where am I going with that? Do you see that happening yourself? Do you think that that's just one of those? This is the generation that we're in now, and we just have to move that way. That's just how it works. It's only going to get faster.
No, I know. I think that is a part of it. What I hope is that there's ultimately going to be room for everything.
Yeah.
My fear is that, a lot of what you're talking about, it's like, yeah, certain, creators that have perhaps been grandfathered in, they're always going to let David Lynch do whatever he wants, or
right, of course.
Wes Anderson, or what, you know what I mean? Like that, but that's because and whether you like that stuff or not is kind of not even the point. Like, but they have the freedom to still kind of experiment and to I mean, Quentin Tarantino, who's
right.
Nobody paces things more slowly than him. Can you is that something? Would anyone else, any new filmmaker, even have been permitted to make Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? I don't think so.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That's my concern. Is like, I think it's fine. The fast pace. I mean, listen, you have to keep audiences invested somehow, and you have to keep us from, checking our TikTok every 2 seconds or whatever the hell we're doing. I don't even know. I'm out. I'm 35. I'm already out of it.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm speaking directly into my phone speaker right now. So that gives you a sense of how good I am with technology. So, I hope that we are able to make new David Lynches, I guess is my point. I hope that there is somehow in the landscape room for all of it, and maybe these things are cyclical, maybe it comes back around. I don't know. So I wish I had a more optimistic answer for you, other than to just say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I don't disagree, and ultimately ultimately there's always going to be room for like good work. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where people are like, don't care about seeing things that are good. I just hope that it doesn't like it doesn't continue to shrink into, something that's like I'll give you a quick, well, I don't want I'm it's fine.
May I insert? Yeah. There is a lot of programming out there that is entertainment that I would consider artistic, and there's a lot of entertainment that I would consider content.
Sure.
Like I can turn this on, but it's not substantive in any way. It's just content. It's a block of information for the Mick consumer, and then there's stuff over here that's like, oh, I'm actually deriving something out of this. Is that making sense? There's a lot of content now.
That's right. And right. And I, and frankly, I've had a better sense of like the need for that more since having kids, obviously as like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old actor without a care in the world. Like I have the luxury to just, inundate myself with cool artistic stuff, and not have to, but now it's like, now that I have a sense of like what life is like for most people, at least for a good like 10 years or however it is that the kids are just completely all encompassed. You know what I mean? Like, who has the time to sit down and like really dive into something that's going to be thought provoking or, emotionally moving? It's like, I'm too exhausted, man. I got an hour before bed. Let's put on some dumb reality show and move on with
right
it.
Exactly. Right. There's nothing wrong with it.
Honestly, the way that I'm like watching movies now is like basically a half an hour at a time on my Peloton in the morning, on the days that I feel like waking up before the kids do. It just took me about 2 weeks to get through Promising Young Woman. So, like this is, so I get it. I mean, it's not everything, I mentioned David Lynch probably 3 times. I am in no headspace to watch nothing by David Lynch right now until I can get some sleep and have some have some time to myself. So It does make sense. I again, I just go back to ultimately, I hope there's room for all of it, and ultimately, I think there is.
Before I get to fan questions,
Sure.
Tell me about Michael Welch the Dad. What has Michael Welch the Dad learned about Michael Welch the person? What have you taken away? How have you changed?
Man, well, it's certainly there's a couple of things that I think are interesting, kind of right out of the gate. Number one, it doesn't like fundamentally change who you are. I think there's this sort of romantic sense, like, oh, once the kid's out and you look them in the eyes for the first time, and it's just like you just change. It's like, no, you're still the same person. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I also thought it was interesting how much of individuals they were right out of the gate. It was just like, oh no, you're kind of like, in a sense, I don't want to say fully formed, but like you have your personality, you have your interests, you have like your strengths and weaknesses. Like you're like your own person.
The ego is
Like,
in full swing.
yeah, right. And it's not, and so I kind of learned that right out of the gate too. It's like, oh, my job is not to like try to shape this person or tell her how to live her life or whatever. It's like, no, I'm a shepherd here. My job is just to support and love and try to, give her some tools or some insights that I've managed to pick up along the way, that I think can be helpful. But no, like this is not, this child doesn't belong to me. It's my child, and I would die for my kids, of course. And I also, another interesting observation I had is like after the first one comes out, I have two of these things. You
thing
love
one
them
and
so
thing
much.
two.
Exactly. We got those shirts. It's like you love them so much. It's like it's almost, it feels inconceivable that you could love anything that much. And then the next one comes out and it's like it's almost like a different branch from the same tree. Like it's not like you have this sort of finite amount of love. And then once that you have more of them, you have to split it up. It's like, oh no, there's like an infinite like river going this way, and now there's a second one that's now going this way.
Like you've discovered another one. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you expand on infinity? Well, you just make another infinity over here. It's wild. It's again, it's very hard to explain. So as far as how I am as a dad, I mean, I think I'm doing okay. I'm doing my best. I'm attentive. Listen. The other thing that definitely changes is like, and I know I'm long-winded and I go on forever, and
dude,
you're
doing great.
It's just how my brain works.
You're great.
Thank you. I like see, and now because I criticize myself, I forgot my damn point.
Let me reframe it with this.
Please do.
You have you had any conversations with your folks about? Okay, I get it now.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes. No, there is a lot of that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially especially with my mom. And it's like, man, yeah, because like it's like, no, don't you understand? Like my whole like I'm responsible for your growth and development. So I'm not just telling you to do things because I'm a jerk. Like I'm like you have to. No, I need you to like understand I'm just trying to help you. Like, and I know that you're your own person and everything, but I do have a little bit of a better sense of like certain things. I've just been around longer. So I wish you would trust me maybe just a little more on a couple of these things. It's going to help you down the road. But it's hard to impart that perspective on a small child. One of the things I was saying is like it's another switch that happens is that you like suddenly everything you do is like for the kid, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, that's how my mom was. It's just like, and sometimes you can, maybe I understand why people sort of have like identity crisis or whatever, where
Mm-hmm.
we're suddenly trying to find out, well, who am I
Mm-hmm.
now? I think part of what's been helpful for me is just understanding like she is still her own person. The both of them are. I'm still my own person.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I choose to dedicate my life to making sure that you have every opportunity
Mm-hmm.
you can have to pursue your happiness any way that you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's being able to separate like again what we do from who we are, I guess.
Are you going to be neutral when it comes to the possibility of entering into your industry? Are you going to be proactive? Are you going to be pushing against it? Have you decided
Hmm.
yet?
Good question. No, I'll be supportive in whatever either one of them want to do. I'm not getting that sense from either
Okay.
one of them, and I know that they're 2 and 5. A
Yeah.
lot can change,
Oh yeah.
but I can tell you that people that kind of have the bug, it tends to come pretty early. You know what I mean? Like even for me, I mean, watching old like, I mean, from the time I'm 3 years old, I'm performing on any home video that is there.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, whether it's just like seeing, just reciting the latest commercial I saw or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so my gut is telling me that's probably not going to be the route that they go,
Mm.
but ultimately I'm never gonna I would never hold them back if that's what
Mm.
they feel like they need to pursue.
Good for you. That's great,
Yeah.
man. Are we do you have you for a few more minutes?
Oh, dude, I'm chilling, man.
Okay. Raj Luthra and Marina Q want to know. I think this is probably an obvious question, so we might as well get it there. MGM and Amazon are developing something Stargate related.
Mhm.
Would you be down for a return, either as the character or as something new? Is that something you'd be willing to pursue?
Oh God, would I be down? Of course. I mean, what are you kidding? No, it would be amazing. I think it'd be super fun to come back as Jack, as older Jack now. I mean, I don't know that that's like I don't know what their plans are. I don't know that that would be necessarily
Mm,
first on the agenda. Um, I can tell you, I think we talked about this back then too. Like there were talks about me coming back at the time. In fact, I had a conversation with Peter over the phone, and he
yes.
was telling me kind of a whole story about how, for some reason or another, they needed Jack's expertise. So it sounded really fun because in that particular case, I was essentially going to be coming back and like running a mission of some kind. Um, but as you know, I was on Joan of Arcadia like immediately after that episode of Stargate, and that pretty much occupied my time for about 2 years, and then it just kind of never, nothing ever materialized from that. So 100% I would do it. I do have. I've never told this, I don't think, to anyone other than the people who already know. But I just thought of it, and I thought it might be interesting to share. Uh, so I had an opportunity to do a screen test for Atlantis. Um, and it was like right after I think the first Twilight movie had just come out. And it was made clear to me, like, essentially, I would have only been able to do one or the other. Um, and I made a choice, and I said, you know what? I kind of want to see where this Twilight thing goes. So I don't know if that was the right decision, but I guess it's a good problem to have. It's like, and who knows if I even would have gotten the part. I may not have, but I didn't want to like waste anyone's time. I didn't want to go in if I wasn't committed to doing it. Um, but there were a lot of factors like, okay, well, we're gonna be moving to Canada and this, which is fine. I love Canada. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I just kind of went like, I've always been someone that's like, I'm loyal to a fault, and I just I don't know. I was in the middle of this thing after that first Twilight movie came out. I mean, it was like there was not. It was insane. It just took over the culture, and I just thought it just feels really stupid to me to like leave this in the middle of it. This is going to go on for another like 4 or 5 movies, and I don't know what it's going to lead to, and blah blah blah. Now Atlantis ended up running for like 10 years, and I mean, who knows? But listen, ultimately, it's like if I had ended up being on that, frankly, the way life would have worked out, I probably never would have met my wife and have the kids that I have now, and life would just be different. But yeah, that was like a kind of a big decision that I had to make at kind of a pivotal moment in my career. Honestly, if I had to do it again or whatever, or was faced with a similar sort of choice now, 100%, of course you go in. I mean, you go be on the TV show. And especially something like that where there's a built-in audience and you sort of know, it's not like you're going to go do a pilot and you don't even know if it's ever going to make it on the air. Like, there's a good chance if the Stargate series is being developed, like it's going to do well.
Right.
But
so
anyway,
wasn't just too long after
just for your audience.
So this wasn't too long after your Fragile Balance appearance then. Because it was later that year that Atlantis, the following season that Atlantis premiered. So was this the Atlantis pilot, or was this a subsequent Atlantis season?
Oh, that's interesting, because the timing, as I remember it, was maybe it wasn't Atlantis.
Was
then.
it Universe?
Was there
2009?
What's that?
Was it Universe 2009?
It must have been. Yeah,
wow,
that's it.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. My bad.
It's all right. Wow, that's crazy. So as a new role.
I didn't see the show, so I don't know what, but it was for a regular. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Yeah. I bet you were up for Matthew Scott. I suspect that's probably what it was. So there was a young upstart first lieutenant on the show that fits your age and description pretty well. So I wouldn't be surprised. That would have been wild. Wow.
I can feel your audience right now going like their brains are going, you picked Twilight over Stargate. What is wrong with you?
Well, maybe one or two, but I mean, no, it's like that's a big decision to make. These are enormous books with an enormous fan base, and they are movies. I don't blame you. I don't blame you whatsoever. So I would have loved to see you again, but at the same time, you got to do you. And as long as you can look back on that part of your life and go, you know what? It's I had a good time, and as long as you're happy where you are now, screw everyone else, man. So
hey,
that's
appreciate
a cool
that,
nugget.
And listen, honestly, quite frankly, if a new Stargate series or a new Twilight series wants me to come back, my phone is available. Now that would be an interesting decision.
Absolutely.
If suddenly I was offered both of those and then had to I don't know. One thing at a
time. Pamela Terachek, when you heard that you were going to be playing young O'Neill, did MacGyver come into consideration at all? You'd seen MacGyver, hadn't you?
Not up to that point, no.
Oh, okay. So you hadn't seen it as a kid. I
hadn't. No.
Okay.
No, I'd never seen anything Richard ever did.
Okay. Peace Rider was under the assumption you had seen it. Do you have any Rick anecdotes from the couple of days that he was on set?
Yeah. So let's think about it.
So he's a producer. So he has the ability to push things around a little bit on set more than any typical actor. I would suspect that. There are clips of them going through dialogue and him being like, okay, let's just go. Let's get this going. He was always interested in like moving it along. Was there ever any of that?
Yeah. Well, what I remember is like, you're right. Like he would, he changed quite a bit of dialogue, which I mean, of course, like it makes sense. It's his deal. He has the ability to do that. And I remember there were certain things like in our big sort of scene together where we're confronting the Asgard, and it's like, that big end of episode 7-page, let's explain the episode scene. There were certain lines that like I think had to say at the same time. And I remember once I said, like, during rehearsal, I was saying what was written, which is generally what you do. And then he said something different. And then he goes, yeah, but why would you say that? That doesn't make sense. And like was giving me and listen, all of this is in a lighthearted way.
Of course.
But total ball buster in terms of like just, and I remember even like the other actors literally were just like, don't listen to him. Don't worry about it.
That sounds about right.
Like in real time, not
Right.
like later, like as he was like busting my chops, like the other actors are going like, just don't worry about it. Don't listen to him.
I mean, I'm sure there would be a lighthearted portion of him that's like, you're playing me. I own you. I mean, even just a sliver. It's like, okay, we're going to work on this play together. So
yeah,
absolutely.
No, for sure. I mean, no, it was wild, man. And like, honestly, I don't want to say if I had to do it again, but like that scene was sort of shot toward the end of the episode. I almost wish it was shot in the beginning. So, cause I was noticing stuff even then. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'd love to incorporate. Darn. I mean, if anything, like there is, I don't want to say that my performance was like it wasn't one note. It was good, but there are like, this is just the perfectionist in me saying like, there's things in retrospect I wish I could have done, but like, listen, ultimately you do the best with what you're working with in any given moment.
If you have the model with you in real time, of course it's going to affect your energy in a far more radical way than if you're watching him on VHS, because you're picking up mannerisms in real time that you can actually apply in real time. I would think it would be a little bit unnerving as a performer, where it'd be like, you know what, this really would have been handy 7 days ago.
Yeah, and there is something about like, I don't want to say it shakes your confidence necessarily, but for the first 6-7 days shooting, it was like I was O'Neill, and I was like owning the fact that I was O'Neill. And then the real one shows up, and it's like, oh, I guess I'm not, but I still have to pretend that I am. It's almost like, I remember I had a buddy who played like young Austin Powers in one of the movies, and like, and he was saying like Mike Myers was on set the first day. I was like, dude, why would you do that to these poor young actors who were like, it was that sequence of Austin Powers and Dr. Evil like in a dorm together. I don't know if you remember. So
I haven't seen that, but I'll take your word for it. There's plenty in here who have.
Two different actors playing these, so yeah, you're right. It does sort of change, like it changes the energy of it. It changes the dynamic a bit. But yeah, man, again, super fun. It was fun to watch him. It was fun to watch him work, and kind of the way that he owns a set. He's, again, just very like all good-hearted, but very sort of like no nonsense. He's kind of, I think, how you think he would be. I mean, to be honest, like however you imagine he is in real life, that's kind of what he is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nicole Rodriguez Galdo, she's a big Stargate and Twilight fan. She said you were young during those roles. What's the biggest difference you think between yourself as an actor then and now? What qualities in yourself have sharpened? Other than all of them.
Between myself as an actor then versus now.
Do you have any rituals that you go through before you have your first day? Do you have a methodology that's changed in any way or evolved in any way?
Right. Yes. I mean, I think, and again, I don't know how interesting this stuff is to people, but I think I've definitely gotten more deliberate in terms of my prep. A lot of like I remember with Twilight, and again, part of it was just because of like the nature of the role, and sort of how I felt that I fit in that universe and what my job was. But it was very kind of like, I sort of purposefully didn't prepare, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like I was like, because the character was sort of felt very close to kind of how I was in high school in some ways. So I wanted it to come across as sort of with as much sort of free flowing kind of life and whatever as possible. So I just sort of like did things to kind of tap into those energies for myself. So I ended up like, instead of flying up, I sort of drove up and like kind of spent a lot of time in nature and just and would I heard this is kind of in some ways how like Jennifer Lawrence works too, where she kind of knows the dialogue going into a particular day on set, and then kind of in the makeup trailer sort of locks it down because she wants it to be sort of as spontaneous and free as possible. So I that was kind of more the approach. Now I don't think I could do it the same way. Now I feel like I kind of have to dig in and do the work. Otherwise it feels more restricting if I don't prepare enough. You know what I mean? It's like, like I have to, the more work I do, the more sort of free and natural ultimately I think I can feel when I'm actually performing it.
I think what you're telegraphing here is like a desire to be sincere, but not come out as a machine. Like you're not an avatar dispensing dialogue. It has to come from a place of sincerity, and from that, a piece of you has to be in it. So more than just your face.
Right. No, 100%. But I think that like I kind of like, if you're asking like the differences in my approach between then and now, I think it's more like, I had more of a I sort of purposefully tried to create the balance of kind of what you're talking about, the free flowing nature of it versus the more technical elements of it. And now as I've gotten older, I've become more honed in the technical elements of the prep work, specifically so that I can be free when I do the job. It's like, it's like in anything in a basketball game or whatever. It's like you want to prepare as much as possible in terms of the X's and O's, but then ultimately when you show up, you have to react to what's happening in front of you. But if you don't have that, like, I don't know, without the prep underneath it, I just don't feel comfortable anymore going into situations and trying to rely on like, the spirits taking over and creating something cool in the moment.
They got this. I'll just show up. No.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm not that. I'm not the roll out of bed actor. I'm like show up with a notebook of of preparation first.
That's funny. Last question. Raj wanted to know: Did you take anything? Did you get to walk off with anything? Any souvenirs?
Oh gosh, I wish I had the balls to be the steal stuff from set guy. I just never did.
Oh,
I never did. I'm trying to think if they gave me anything. I don't think so. The only like, gosh, I don't have a lot. I still have my bloody Letterman jacket from Z Nation, which was a zombie show that I was on. They were nice enough to let me keep that because it's like, well, it's got blood on it now. We can't return this.
That's right. No, it'd be a horrible cleaning bill. So that's funny. I'm going to be going out to LA later on in the next month or two here, working on a project. I'd love to take you to lunch if you're willing, and I've got a couple of screen use souvenirs that I'd like to give you. So,
oh man, that would be fantastic. I would love that. Yeah, no, please reach out. You have my email now, so just reach out anytime.
Absolutely, sir. This has been fantastic, Mike. It's been great to pick your brain this decade of our lives, and I'm eager to see what you do next. Is there anything on the horizon that you want to talk about, or are we just focusing on being dad right at this moment?
No, I thank you, man. I appreciate that. And again, I do apologize for the technical issues. I hope it sounds okay and it looks okay. Great. And okay, good. As long as you're happy.
Absolutely.
So I do have a movie that just played at South by Southwest. It's called Scrambled. It's a really, really lovely comedy that I think is a very special project. It's about a young woman in her early 30s who's decided to to freeze her eggs. So it's kind of a serious subject matter, but done in a very like fun, comedic, and relatable way.
Okay.
And then I had another movie come out earlier this year called The Disappearance of Mrs. Wu. I had just kind of a small part in that, but that's available digitally. And then I am set to work on a film in New Mexico this summer. Obviously, things can happen between now and this summer, but so I can't really tell you anything more than that to this point. But that's one that I'm very excited about if it goes through. So.
Well, the life of an actor, I think we hear all these horror stories about kids who are just, chewed up and spit out by this system. And to see someone, go through all of what he's, worked on and still have a smile on his face, these are good things. You've obviously had good people in your life who have kept you on the straight and narrow. So.
Yeah. Well, that's very kind of you to say, and make no mistake, I'm completely chewed up.
Okay.
But I love the work ultimately. Yeah. And that the passion for the work has never died. So, man, as long as people are nice enough to keep letting me be a part of stuff, I will happily oblige. But man, listen, it's been great talking to you. It's always fun to kind of, dig back in to your past and re-explore some of these things. So yeah, man, it's been
this has been great. I appreciate you as an artist, and this has just been terrific. So yeah, so I'll reach out to you in the next couple of months here as things get moving and check in. And thank you for taking so much time to be on my show. It means a lot to have you.
Absolutely, man. My pleasure. Anytime. Appreciate you.
Sir. You take care of yourself.
Okay, cool. You too, man.
Be well. Michael Welch, everyone. Young Jack O'Neill in Stargate SG-1. He was one of the first that I spoke with when I was over at Gate World. And it was... his performance is just one of those that it's like, there are artists that come on and can make the show themselves for just one episode, and there are people who help push the show in ways that you don't expect. So that one episode is continually one that stands out to people, and fans have been asking me for a while, when are you going to get him on? Like, okay, we got him. So thank you, Michael. We've got a couple of things I need to show you guys before we wrap up here. I want to mention Alan Gowan's YouTube channel. So Alan Gowan of GateCon, he has started a new YouTube channel, if I can get the information correct here. And of course, I am not prepared because I'm me. All right. So the details that he gave me, he started a channel called Better Sci-Fi on YouTube. And he's already released one episode. If I can switch over to my imager here. And I think he's focusing on Mandalorian. So go ahead and check out Alan's content over at youtube.com/better sci-fi and subscribe to him. He's been on our episodes for trivia before, and we've had a really good time with him. And I think he's a great guy, and I think he's going to be a great host with this. So go ahead and give his channel a poke and a prod. And the last thing before I let everyone go, I've been really impressed with what is happening? Everything's screwing up all at once here. Here we go. I've been really impressed with some of the artwork that James C.D. Robbins has been releasing lately. This is one that he made of Jason Momoa as Ronan Dex. And he says, this one is from the Wayback Machine, Season 2 of Stargate Atlantis. We introduced a new character, Ronan Dex, played by Jason Momoa. I was tasked with designing a weapon for him, a sort of energy pistol, also a sword. And when I met him, I realized he was going to need a really big gun. He's 6'4". Here he is with his blaster, which he loved to learn to use like a Wild West gunslinger. And James C.D. Robbins was the production designer and on-set artist for Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, and Stargate Universe. So I just really wanted to share that image. Thanks so much to my team. I really appreciate you guys, Tracy, Jeremy, Reese, Anthony, Summer, and Linda Gategabber Fury for making the show possible. Big thank you to Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web. He keeps our channel, our website up and running. And I think that's everything that we've got here. We have Courtney J. Stevens joining us this Sunday. And go to dialthegate.com to see all of the current lineup of guests for everyone who's going to be coming as we roll out season 3 and take a break for the summer. My thanks once again to Michael Welch for joining me in this episode. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I'll see you on the other side.